We're not really too sure what it's going to look like when it's finished, but what it did was allow municipalities to have a little more authority. So at that time, I went down to Queen's Park and was able to speak with many of the ministers there when they were dealing with Bill 139 at the time. And I said, here's the time, here's the opportunity for the ministry to accept municipalities' right to say yes or no. Here it is right now, right when you're moving the OMB, et cetera, giving municipalities a little more say, go the extra mile and give them a chance to say yes or no to landfills. Certainly the Conservative Party and the NDP Party supported it 100%. In fact, quite a few Liberals did at that point in time. It actually was told that Bill 139 just wasn't the home for it, at this point in time, and that maybe we'd take a look at it later on. Well, the later on happened with Ernie Hardeman, who was MP at the time, is now Minister of, MPP at the time, and Minister of Rural Affairs. He, at that time, just being a member, put in a private member's bill. And I sat down with him and we wrote it out, and it was a terrific a private member's bill. Actually went through to second reading before the government actually fell and it was going through for another election. But we had the support. We had the full support at that time in the second reading to be able to go ahead with it. You know, right now I have, it says 120 on this slide. It's actually closer to 150 right now. 150 municipalities across Ontario have actually brought forward the motion to give municipalities the right to say yes or no. And one of the big pushes on there, the reasons for it to take place, is because of what our Premier actually brought to my attention. I have a personal letter that he wrote to me while he was running for Premier, pretty well stating that these things should not be forced down the throats of municipalities, that he stands behind it. As a former city councillor, I respect the rights for local municipalities to make the decisions best for their community. Well, then this should be moving along fairly quickly, you'd think. But right now, it seems to be bogged down. We have many, there's the actual letter that from Doug Ford saying that Mayor Comiskey, this is a good idea, that he supports Ernie Hardeman's private member's bill fully. We've had the past minister, Rod Phillips, and he was excited about the motion coming forward. We've had many ministers agreeing that this should happen. The motion isn't to stop landfills. The motion isn't for me to say you can't have a landfill. The motion isn't to say that if you want a landfill, you can have it. The motion is to say you have the right to say yes or no. You have the right to stop 18.5 million ton of waste going into a landfill 800 meters from your subdivision. You should have the right to be able to stop something like that when the town itself is on well water, when it sits right beside the Thames River. In one of my speeches to Toronto, I said, well, why don't you put the landfill right in the Don Valley? I mean, why not? Or Christie Pit. If it's safe, if everything's going to be good, if there's no problems with it whatsoever, you're not worried about the smell, you're not worried about the birds, you're not worried about the contamination of air, water, and soil, why not put it there? Well, everybody just joked, said, well, that's a silly idea. You wouldn't do that by the public. But it's okay to put it right beside 13.5 thousand people. 13,000 people we have in the town of Ingersoll that are sitting on potential disaster. If this goes through, then it happens. What I don't want it to do is for other municipalities to have this forced down their throat. You should have the right, and that's the direction I'm trying to make these motions in, and I'm hoping, as your council has the right to bring this forward, the motion that is there to pass it, or to look at it and to approve it, But that is my presentation, Your Worship. I thank you for the time, and if I do have some time left to take any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer anything I could.
Any questions? Councillor Vasilakos.
I just wanted a little clarity. So just in terms of the intent of the motion, it's to approve or reject landfill projects in or adjacent to their communities. So my curiosity is what happens when you have a municipality. You could have municipalities that have several municipalities that are adjacent to them. Is the minimum standard that they all have to agree? Is it majority? Like, what's the decision-making process? Is it that if one says no, then all
That's exactly right now. It's a terrific question. I believe that right now is where the ministry is dealing with. They certainly do. Minister Urick is totally behind this. And so I think that what they're doing is trying to figure out how to deal with it. You take Oxford, for instance. We're a two-tier. You're not, but we're two-tier. And so what it would play upon is the municipality and the upper tier would have to agree to it. If either of them said no, then it shouldn't be. When I said that it's 800 meters from our subdivision, believe it or not, halfway through that 800 meters is another municipality, and that's the municipality of Zora. Zora Township is right there, so actually the landfill would not be in the town of Ingersoll, but it would be in Zora Township, which is right on our borderline. So do we have the right? Should we have the right? Yes. If there's a potential for contamination or just smell alone, or anything that contaminates the soil, the water, or the air, you should have the right. So how does that agreement play out? And the thing is that if you have a community or municipalities that does not believe that this is in the best interest of their community, then they should have the right to say no. Now, one of the largest arguments on this was, well, Ted, if you ban this and have municipalities say no to it, then we'll never have another landfill. Well, number one, right off the bat, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But number two, we have put out a survey, and I believe the survey came to Stratford, and I thank you very much for those councillors that did answer it. I know a few did from Stratford answer the survey, indicating the fact that not Stratford said it, but 27% of the 1,700 surveys that went out, we received back 380. And out of the 380, 27%, they would be interested in sitting down and discussing it if three things were met. And that was number one, safety, distance from community, and monetary reimbursement. So what this does, if nothing else, it makes a company that wants to bring in a landfill to sit with the municipality and talk it over. Would all the municipalities say no if they realized that it was multi-million-dollar yearly income to them? It gives them a chance to sit. So the yes or no to the different communities, it would be up to the community itself. This council sits and decides the best things for the community.
So as a follow-up to that, because and I'm just curious, because I'm not exactly sure how this plays out, if there's a monetary, so would that monetary benefit be distributed to the adjacent municipalities? That's where it gets tricky. I could just see municipalities arguing. One wants it because they're going to get money from it, but the adjacent ones say no because they don't get financial. Like, what would be the framework, or is this to be
Well, and that's just it. I believe the idea is to be able to sit down with the municipalities. If you had the right to say no to the next door neighbor's municipality, then you do have the right to sit down and discuss and maybe lay out the monetary benefit for everyone.
Okay.
Right now, there is nothing. It is up to actually let's use Walker Environmental as an example. It's up to them to decide what a community would receive or would not receive. And so that's the rub right now. Not that we're looking for anything. We would strictly say no because of the safety aspect to it and the distance to population. But 27% of the municipalities would be interested in sitting down and talking with proponents for a landfill. So that's kind of, it wanes the whole theory that we would never have a landfill again. But what if we didn't have a landfill? I believe that the idea that if you put out there that said suddenly the ministry said by a certain amount of time we are not going to have landfills, folks come up with a reason, come up with a way to be able to get rid of our waste rather than burying it. And you see, landfills are different than what they used to be. I'm from the farm, I'm a farm boy, and we did bad things when I was a kid. We would take our bottles and our tin cans back to the back 40 and fill in a hole. We would, and that wasn't good. But what it was tin and glass. I'm not saying we were angels in that part. We didn't have any other place to put it. Today, you're not burying glass and tin. You're burying this upholstery right here that has the foam on the inside of it, and all the product that weaves it together is weaved together with enough toxins and chemicals that we have no idea what it's going to amount to in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, when this leachate bubbles up in the bottom and creates something that is dandy. What do you do with all the leachate? You burn it off, you do something with it. What happens if that liner leaks and it starts to travel? The quarry that they're looking at is a limestone quarry. That's a porous rock. I mean, if any leak through that liner, it's going to travel. And it could be anywhere, whether it's St. Mary's or any type of limestone quarry along that line, it would travel.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Ingram.
My question is actually to staff, only because I know we have some knowledge in this area. When you're going through the ECA approval for a landfill, does the adjacent municipality get notified?
Mr. Dolovic?
Yeah, through your worship, I'd have to look into it to see what goes on with it. I do know in past when citing, when I worked for a previous municipality, it was very much a public process with respect to citing a new landfill. And so, we had a number of parameters that were set and going through it. It was very much a public process.
And is that the same for privately owned versus publicly owned?
Through your worship, I'd have to confirm on that. I'm just thinking again, and again, it was actually with Walker Environmental in Niagara Falls when they were looking at expanding landfill operations. They very much went through a public process.
And then one other question is, what is the minimum distance setback for odor related to a landfill site?
Your worship, I do not know that. I'd have to check on that. I'd have to look at what ECAs what we have in place in our landfill right now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Thanks very much, Ted. Appreciate your time coming over tonight.
Thank you. Thank
Councillor
you very
Sutton.
much for.
Can I move that motion in the report?
Yes, it's on page 56 of the agenda, the motion. Seconder for that, Councillor Burback. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Moving on to item,
Take care. Safe
moving on
travels.
to item 6.2, presentation by Overlap and Associates. There is a motion that the presentation by Overlap and Associates regarding key performance indicators for the city's strategic priorities be heard.
Moved by Councillor Ingram and Councillor Vasilakos. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Please come forward.
Well, it's nice to be here again. My name is Marilyn, and I'm from Overlap Associates. First of all, I want to say congratulations to council and city staff. Over the past year, you have done some wonderful achievements that we'd like to just recap for you here. So earlier in 2019, Overlap worked with Stratford City Council to use human-centered design, process we use at Overlap, to develop the strategic priorities for 2018 to 2022 term. Those were approved in April. And then later in the year, the Office of the CAO reached out to us to build on this work through the development of key performance indicators to measure progress towards the strategic priorities and report that back to the public. So I'd like to describe for you a bit of the process that happened over the course of that work. So Overlap facilitated 3 half-day workshops with city staff. Participants in these were self-organized into groups based on their expertise within each strategic priority. True to the human-centered design methodology we use, which many of you have become familiar with now, we worked through a series of divergent and convergent activities to develop these KPIs, key performance indicators. So the scope of Overlap's process facilitation included 3 main stages. The first step was to better determine the KPIs. We started by developing 2 to 3 key objectives for each priority area. So key performance indicators, in short, are measurable values that demonstrate how effectively any organization is working towards their objectives. So the KPI isn't actually the goal. A KPI just measures progress towards your goal. The first step for this process was to to be clear about what the city wanted to achieve. So before developing KPIs, they developed clear high-level objectives for each of the strategic priority areas. So what did this look like in the workshops? The strategic priorities developed and improved by council actually had a lot of the work done for us. So they included, the ones approved by council in April, included suggestions for what success could look like throughout term. And these were actually suggestions generated by the community in previous engagement. So leveraging this work already done and approved by council, groups generated ideas for objectives to articulate what the city wanted to have achieved by the end of term. And for these objectives, we drafted them to be concise. So they focused on a single aim in order to support the development of 1 KPI per objective. So the objectives were then prioritized and refined to prepare for developing KPIs. That takes us to the next workshop. In step 2, we developed key performance indicators for each objective. So again, these indicators are measurable values that demonstrate how effectively we are achieving our objectives. So what the city was looking for here was something that they could use to prove progress towards an objective, and then a statistic to measure it. That was basically it. There are lots of concepts, it's important to remember, that could be measured to demonstrate success. In this case, the city chose just 1 thing to measure that could flag whether you are on track or need to demonstrate more attention in order to achieve one of these objectives. So this looked like, in the workshop, leveraging the knowledge and experience of city staff to generate ideas to measure each objective based on data the city currently has available. Next, the groups crafted KPI statements that incorporated those measures. Each KPI statement included a statistic, the numerical value, the data source or the proof towards progress, and as necessary, a description that gave a bit of scope or exclusion or inclusion criteria for the measure. Groups throughout this process presented their KPIs, gathered feedback, and refined them through the workshop. In the third workshop, we worked towards step 3, developing a tool to support KPI tracking. So Overlap created a simple template for teams to use to monitor the progress of their KPI over time. The tool was reviewed by the CAO and then tested with city managers and staff in that workshop. Revisions from that testing in the workshop were made, and that was presented to the CAO with an updated template for use over time and to be adapted over time as well. So that's an overview of the process that Overlap took to facilitate those 3 workshops and the hard work of city staff to go into developing those. Could I ask if there are any questions about that process?
Any questions? Nope, going on. Nope, we're good.
Great. Well, on behalf of Overlap, best of luck monitoring those over the next year.
Thanks so much, Marilyn.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time very much.
on to item 7, orders of the day. Item 7.1 is a resolution with a staff recommendation that council approve a variance in the transit terminal capital budget in the amount of $331,000, that the transit terminal capital budget be increased to $2,622,678, and that the funds be paid from the federal gas tax reserve.
Motion, Councillor Vasilakos, seconded by Councillor Burback. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried.
Moving on to item 8, business for which previous notice has been given. Item 8.1, at the December 9th regular council meeting, notice of intent was given that Councillor Ingram intends to put forward the following motion for consideration at this evening's meeting. And the motion is that staff review and prepare a report on aligning the sidewalk snow clearing bylaw for the uptown core with the city's timelines for sidewalk snow removal, and this is for the consideration of council.
Councillor Ingram, you'll move that?
Yes, I will.
Seconder, Councillor Burback. Discussion. Not all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried.
Moving on to item 9, reports of the standing committees. Item 9.1 is the report of the Infrastructure, Transportation, and Safety Committee, and there are 14 items listed for consideration as follows. Item 9.1.1 is to amend parking on Battershall Court. Item 9.1.2 is parking amendments from Perth Street, from Downey Street to Borden Street. Item 9.1.3 is a bylaw exemption for Winterfest 2020. Item 9.1.4 is parking amendments for Short Street between Matilda Street and Foreman Avenue. Item 9.1.5 is with regards to the citywide default speed limit review. Item 9.1.6 is a motion also with regards to citywide default speed limit review. Item 9.1.7 is the open house and recommendations for the Erie Street sidewalk. Item 9.1.8 is the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard 2019 infrastructure review. Item 9.1.9 is a Drinking Water Quality Management Standard 2019 management review. Item 9.1.10 relates to the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard Operational Plan endorsement by council. Item 9.1.11 is with regards to the lead in drinking water update. Item 9.1.12 is also with regards to the lead in drinking water update. Item 9.1.13 is to deny a request for a crossing guard at West Gore and Dufferin. And item 9.1.14 is a selection of a preferred sign design concept for the comprehensive wayfinding strategy.
Moved by, and I'll take them separately when we identify.
Yeah,
Okay, so moving Councillor Vasilakos and seconding Councillor Ingram. Which ones would you like separate?
9.1.1.
9.1.1, okay. So we have moved by Councillor Vasilakos and seconded by Councillor Ingram, item 9.1.2 through to 9.1.14. Discussion on any of those items.
I just wanted to confirm 9.1.14, just to confirm that the welcome to font, the original font will be included, just as a baseline for the other fonts.
Yes.
Through your worship, yes, it will be once we have them and are able to bring them back to council for their consideration.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further on items 9.1.2 to 9.1.14? If not, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. It's been moved and seconded for item 9.1.1 by Councillor Vasilakos and Councillor Ingram. Councillor Seven.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment again. I'd like to see, I want to speak against the motion. I'd like to see parking retained year-round as it is on other streets, and I think the overnight restrictions in the winter that are on other streets as a default in Stratford are adequate for the court as well. And also, just to reiterate, the initial report for this noted that the majority of residents on the court would like to retain parking as it is and not have it restricted. So I'm going to speak against the motion.
Thank you. Any other member of council? Councillor Clifford?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is there anything about that court that is unique compared with other courts in town that have parking? Like, I don't quite understand the dynamics behind this compared with other courts in the city.
Through your worship, yeah, when we looked, there was only one other court we could find that has parking restricted. In that case, it's all year round. Really, this was in response to the concerns raised with cars parked. Winter maintenance came up as an issue, and I think that's where the committee went to, is just restricting it in the wintertime. And as we've said in the previous reports, whether there's an island or not an island, if there's a car parked within the circle parked, winter maintenance equipment will not enter until there are no vehicles in there and then carry out the activities. And that was raised as a concern with respect to the residents and not getting winter maintenance done in a timely manner. But that will continue if there is a car parked. So if we go with the status quo, just recognize that if there is a car parked in the cul-de-sac or in the circle park, the equipment won't go in there until it's free of vehicles.
Councillor Ritzman?
Just a question with regards to that, will they not go, or is that the discretion of the driver not to enter the cul-de-sac?
Through the chair, that's how the drivers are trained. It's part of our health and safety training. There have been concerns in the past when they're making the turn, the back end of the vehicle sliding out and potentially hitting a parked vehicle. So taking that into account, they are instructed as part of their yearly training not to go into the circle park if there's a parked vehicle, and return when the vehicles have been cleared.
Anything further? All right, the motion's been moved and seconded by Councillor Vasilakos and Councillor Ingram. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? 2 opposed, and that's carried.
Moving on to item 9.2, report of the Planning and Heritage Committee, and there are 3 items listed for consideration. Item 9.2.1 is a planned condominium application, 31 CDM-18001. Item 9.2.2 relates to a proposed exemption to the sign bylaw. And item 9.2.3 amends the terms of reference for the Heritage Stratford Committee.
Moved by Councillor Ingram, seconder Councillor Burback. Discussion. Not all those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried.
Moving on to item 9.3, report of the Finance and Labor Relations Committee, and there are 2 items listed for consideration as follows. Item 9.3.1 is the extension of the water and sewage billing services agreement with Festival Hydro, Inc. For a 1-year term as amended, and item 9.3.2 is with regards to the purchasing of electric buses.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford, seconder. Councillor Gaffney, discussion. Not all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried.
Moving on to item 10, notice of intent. Item 10.1 is notice is hereby given that a joint public meeting with the City of Stratford, Township of Perth South, and the County of Perth will be held on Thursday, January 16th, 2020 at 6 p.m. at the Rotary Complex. The purpose of the public meeting is to hear from the public regarding a proposal to annex land from the Township of Perth South by the City of Stratford, and further details are to be provided on the city's website by December 19th, 2019.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 11, reading of the bylaws. Item 11.1, there are 4 bylaws listed that can be taken collectively upon unanimous vote of council present. Item 11.1.1 is appointments to advisory committees. Item 11.1.2 is an agreement for provision of animal control services. Item 11.1.3 is an addendum agreement for water and sewage billing and collection services. And item 11.1.4 is amendments to the traffic and parking bylaw.
Councillor Bunting, you're moving to be taken collectively. Councillor Vasilakos, seconding. Discussion. If not, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's unanimous, so we'll go to first and second reading of bylaws 11.1 through 4. Councillor Ingram and Councillor Burback moving and seconding. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Third and final reading is Councillor Gaffney and Councillor Ingram moving and seconding bylaws 11.1, 2, 3, and 4 for third and final reading. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried.
Moving on to item 11.2. The following bylaw requires third and final readings. Item 11.2.1 is acceptance of tender for the pruning, removal, and disposal of designated trees and stumps.
Moved by Councillor Clifford and seconded by Councillor Ritzma. Discussion. Out of order, sir. You're not on the agenda. Any discussion from members of council? Councillor Seven.
I just wanted to comment that I feel like by approving this and changing the award, we're sort of disrupting the potential for future, like the competitive market for requests for proposals. I feel like this might hurt more competitive bids in the future and hinder our potential for savings. So I'm going to speak against the motion.
Thank you. Anything further? If not, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? There's 5 opposed. That's defeated. Direction from council then. Councillor Seven.
Make a motion to award the tender to the original Kodiak.
Seconder for that? Okay. Under the orders of procedure, we'd need to ask for a reconsideration motion. Correct, Ms. Defoe?
For your worship, yes.
Okay, so that requires 8 of members of council to vote in favor of it, and 2 members who voted in favor of awarding the contract to the other individual would have to be the mover and seconder. Does any of the councillors that voted in favor of it, Councillors Bunting, Ritzma, or Clifford, wish to move and second a reconsideration motion? Okay, so at this time then, the only direction that would be able to be made would be to send it back to staff for to look at the tender, and we'd have to also direct them to extend for a period of time for service provision.
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Clifford moving, seconder Councillor Ritzma. Discussion. If not, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Moving on to item 12, consent agenda. Are there any consent agenda items to be considered by council?
Seeing none?
Item 13 is new business. Are there any new business items?
Councillor Ritzma.
Just a question through to Director Duluvic. With regards to the green bin, the picking up the kitchen waste, there was a question presented to me is if an individual wanted to go out and buy a bigger bin than the one proposed by cities, that the city was going to purchase, how would that look, and what are your thoughts around that?
Mr. Dolovic.
Through your worship, yeah. Clarify, it's about a 45-liter size bin. That's the typical bin that's being used throughout the province where they do have a green bin program. And so we did look at a larger bin. We did talk to the contractor. What the issue becomes is there is a weight restriction. And if you know, when you look at our existing waste collection and the information we put out, we talk about different sizes, but there is always a weight limit of 50 pounds. So, the same would apply with the green bin, a 50-pound weight limit. If it's greater than that, it can be refused for the pickup. So the concern is if they go to a larger bin, it exceeds the 50 pounds, the contractor simply says, not picking it up, it's too big. So, as I said, everyone is going to get a bin, so I think, the concerns relayed by that residence, they should, wait and see, get the green bin and let it operate and see if that is indeed large enough for their needs.
Thank you.
Councillor Burback, Vasilakos, Bunting will go in that order.
Just a suggestion that if a person wanted to put out more than could be held in one bin, maybe they could get a second one.
I think Mr. Dolovic will take that back. Okay, Councillor Vasilakos.
That was the same. I was thinking like our recycle bins, adding, people could pick up an extra one from the city.
Councillor Bunting, read the.
Same thing.
Okay. Anything further? All right. Any other items of new business? And if not, we'll take a motion to adjourn to reconvene in standing committee. Councillor Burback and Councillor Gaffney. All those in favor? That's carried. We'll take a very brief recess for 5 minutes.
order. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Seeing none, we have no delegation scheduled. So we'll move on to item 4.1, which is the proposed exemption to sign bylaw 159-2004. We do have a staff recommendation that the request to permit a fascia sign above the first story at 305 Romeo Street South be approved, as it does satisfy the criteria of section 23.0E of the sign bylaw.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Councillor Gaffney, and seconded by Councillor Vasilakos. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. I will take a motion for adjournment, please. Councillor Clifford and Councillor Bunting. All in favor? Thank you.
Make us proud.
I'll call to order the Finance and Labor Relation Committee. Are there any disclosed pecuniary interests in general nature thereof? And note it. Item 4.1, a staff recommendation that the taxes totaling approximately $1,681,081.09 is shown in 2019 tax adjustment summary dated December 16th, 2019 be adjusted, which the city's portion is estimated to be 1,313,5607, and that the associate interest be canceled in proportion to the tax adjustment, and that the treasurer be directed to adjust the collector's roll accordingly. Moved by Councillor Gaffney, second by Councillor Vasilakos. Questions, comments? All in favor? It's unanimous. A motion to adjourn. Councillor Ingram, Councillor Burbach. All in favor? Thank you.
You did good.
I'd like to call the meeting of the Social Services Committee to order. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Moving on. Item 3, subcommittee minutes are there for your consideration. No delegation scheduled. Item 5.1, the Housing and Homelessness Plan for Stratford, Price County, and St. Mary's 5-year update. There's a staff recommendation there for your consideration, for information. Councillor Ritzma, Councillor Vasilakos. Vasilakos, I got it right this time, okay. Any questions, any comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. Item number 6, the Salvation Army Tax Program for Stratford and North Perth. There's a staff recommendation for your considerations. Councillor Clifford, Councillor Burbach. Any questions or comments? Councillor Vasilakos.
Since Councillor Henderson isn't here this evening, she'll want me to remind anyone who may be watching that this tax program isn't just available for people who are on Ontario Works or ODSP, but it can be anyone in the community that falls below that low-income cutoff that they have. So we're promoting the program to more than just those that are receiving direct social services. And if maybe Ms. McElroy can say what those limits are for anyone who might be interested.
Through the chair, I don't have the direct one, but it is through the LICO scale.
Okay.
So I can get back to you on.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'll call for an adjournment.
Sorry, I just
Sorry,
found
one
it.
more thing,
I just found it. A single person, $28,000 annual income. 2 people, $32,500. 3 people, $38,000, and 4 or more people, $42,500. There we go. Sorry, I found it.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn, sorry. Oh, sorry, I haven't called the question, I beg your pardon. All those in favor? Thank you very much. All carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Vasilakos, Councillor Ingram. All those in favor? Carried, thank you.
Council reconvene, Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest made at standing committee and to be restated at the reconvened portion?
Seeing none,
Moving on to item 15.2, committee reports. Item 15.2.1 is the report of the Finance and Labor Relations Committee. And there is a motion that item 4.1 be approved.
Councillor Clifford moving, seconded by Councillor Gaffney. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried.
Item 15.2.2 is the Social Services Committee, and there are 2 items listed for consideration as follows. Item 5.1 was the Housing and Homelessness Plan for Stratford, Perth County, and St. Mary's for the 5-year update. And item 6.1, the Salvation Army Tax Program for Stratford and North Perth.
Moved by Councillor Bunting and seconded by Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried.
Item 15.2.3 is the Planning and Heritage Committee, and there is 1 item listed for consideration as follows. Item 4.1, which was the proposed exemption to the sign bylaw.
Councillor Ingram and Councillor Burback moving and seconding. Discussion. Not all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried.
Item 15.3, which is reading of the bylaws for the reconvene portion, and there are 3 bylaws listed for consideration as follows. Bylaw 11.6, which is agreement for provision of tax preparation service in Stratford. Bylaw 11.7, agreement for provision of tax preparation services North Perth. And bylaw 11.8, which is the confirmatory bylaw, and these bylaws can be taken collectively upon unanimous vote of council present.
Moved by Councillor Burback and seconded by Councillor Ingram that they be taken collectively. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried unanimously. First and second reading, Councillor Clifford and seconded Councillor Seven for bylaws 11.6, 7, and 8. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Third and final reading, Councillor Gaffney and Councillor Ritzma. Moving third and final reading of bylaws 11.6, 7, and 8. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. A motion to adjourn this evening's meeting. Councillor Burback and Councillor Vasilakos, and before we do so, on behalf of council, we wish the staff and all the residents of the community a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays for a safe and enjoyable time. And may you, if you travel, be safe and enjoy the time of family and friends. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.